Well, hello again, it's Andrew here, and this is episode number 42. And we're continuing today in our series on Matthew chapter 12. Today it's verse 33 to 37. And we're coming towards the end of the passage that concerns the controversy of Jesus with his response to the Pharisees over their concern about him healing men with demon possession on the Sabbath. So we pick it up in verse 33 of chapter 12. Either make the tree good, says Jesus, and its fruit good, or make the tree bad and its fruit bad. For the tree is known by its fruit. You brood of vipers, how can you speak good things when you are evil? For out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks. The good person brings good things out of a good treasure, and the evil person evil things out of an evil treasure. I tell you, on the day of judgment, you will have to give an account for every careless word you offer. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. Now, there is a lot that we could consider from this passage. And my mind has gone in multiple directions. In the end, though, it seemed to me that we need to remember that Jesus is responding to the Pharisees' accusation that he's working on behalf of Satan. And in this passage we really see Jesus coming out of his corner. You brood of vipers. That's fairly strong language. He challenges the very basis of all they say and do, and whether we're aware of it or not, the heart. As Proverbs 4:23 says, keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flows the springs of life. Or as Eugene Peterson puts it in the Message, keep vigilant watch over your heart. That's where life starts. The heart is central to who we are, and to how we engage, and to how we see. For one, I'm talking about myself here, who comes from the evangelical part of the church, this is particularly challenging. In the end, much of the evangelical response to issues is to ask, yes, that's fine, Andrew, but what does the Bible say? For the Pharisees, they're asking that very question. And their conclusion is that the Sabbath must be protected at all costs. No exceptions, no matter how good and noble such exceptions may appear to be. Does this sound familiar? As the church struggles with contemporary issues, with human sexuality, with the issues surrounding race and culture, with the place of women in church leadership and society at large, with how we relate to people of other faith systems, with contraception and abortion, with the environment, with welfare support for the poor. Well, maybe not so much these last two. We don't seem to think they matter to God, although Scripture says a great deal about them. I've often concluded that if we could find an honouring way of reading Scripture, which would give us permission to put some of our sacred cows to rest, we might be okay with it, or we might not. For many of us, there are deeper issues than simply that our reading of Scripture backs up our deeply held prejudices. What Jesus is pointing to here is that being people of the Word, as the Pharisees were, does not guarantee that you're going to get it right. He's pointing to the heart. It's in the heart that the real issues are settled, and what's really in the heart will out eventually. After all, it's out of the overflow of the heart that the mouth speaks. That's what Jesus is saying here. And even though you may be great students of the Word, that is no guarantee that you've got it right. Quoting Scripture and verse on their own do not cut the mustard. I demonstrated yesterday that Jesus could be conscripted to say two completely contradictory things about the same subject. In Matthew 12 and 30 and Luke 11 and 23, he says, "The one who is not with me is against me." In Luke 9 and 40 he said, "Whoever is not against us is for us." Now, these two things, as I said, are contradictory. It's only as we see them together and when we read them in their context that we actually recognise there's a way that they can be synthesised. I've long been of the view that it's the underlying principles of Scripture that we need to be seeking and taking notice of. And this ultimately pegs us back to what kind of God it is that we think we're worshipping. One who is law or one who is love. Remember, the law was given to lead us to love. Hang on a minute, you might say. It doesn't say that. Well, it does. It says the law was given to lead us to Christ. And that's in Galatians 3 and 24. If Christ is the exact representation of the one who is described as love, because that's actually what Scripture does say, we can expect the law to ultimately lead us to love. This is who God is, where God resides, and what God is calling us into. Yesterday I referenced what fruitfulness looks like, and that's in fact what this passage is largely about. Pegging it to the list given in Galatians 5. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. How can this list be summarized? By love. Love demonstrates the action, it demonstrates the presence of the Spirit of God. The love that seeks the highest and best good for the other. This is no soppy, sentimental kind of love. This is a love that can be vigorous and costly. But it's a love which seeks the highest and best good for the other. The whole of the law is summarized in that single call. To love the Lord our God with all our being, and to love our neighbour as ourselves. Now there's a number of ways where this is put in the Gospels. Actually the one that I'd commend to you is Mark chapter 12 verses 30 to 34. It's worth a look. It's worth just to sit with just for a few moments and recognise the richness and the poignancy of what is being offered here. Mark 12 verses 30 to 34. So perhaps the question needs to be reframed. In the light of this God of love, whose concern is for our well-being, the question might become not what does the Sabbath require of us, but what does the God who gave us the Sabbath require of us? We may then come to a quite different answer. One based not on fear of breaking the supposed letter of the law, but based on love. Given that the Sabbath was given for our benefit, to enrich our lives and give us space to connect with the giver of the Sabbath, what does the healing of one who may never have enjoyed the benefit of the Sabbath invite us into? Celebration or condemnation? It seems that for many in the time of Jesus, the answer was condemnation. Rather than recognizing the joy that freedom for this man might have brought to God, they feared his wrath for violating a law that was intended to offer life, freedom, and rest. What kind of God is this? So much of our engagement with Scripture can helpfully come back to this question. What kind of God is my interpretation? And I put that intentionally, is my interpretation of this particular Scripture portraying here? Many will say one of holiness. Okay. What they usually mean is that the law is given, rules that must be obeyed, and judgment that will come when these rules are not obeyed. They either live in fear or will judge others with a deluded unawareness of their own failure to see the call of God to love. I've seen this, I've experienced it, I've been there myself. Much like the Pharisees that Jesus is piling into here. In the end, Scripture is both a window into God's understanding of the world and a mirror which shows us who we really are. When we repudiate both these functions and simply see it as a rule book designed to guide us in our day-to-day, we have missed the richness of all it offers us as it points us back to the giver. Well, I hope you found it helpful, or even mildly interesting. God bless you.